Alright, as part of 6.1, we talked about how to factor out a GCF, but also part of 6.1 is another type of factoring method. We call it the grouping method. The grouping method, for it to work, you must have 4 terms in the polynomial. Okay? When you have 4 terms in the polynomial, what we're going to do is separate it into 2 mini problems, where I'm going to group the first 2 terms in a set of parentheses, and then the last 2 terms in a set of parentheses. When I group them, make sure that in the second set of parentheses that you include the sign. You'll see that in a minute. Once you're done with grouping, you're going to take each of the little mini problems, those parentheses, and you're going to factor out the GCF in each of the parentheses. Remember, when we were factoring out a GCF, we talked about our steps, A through D. So you're still going to do your A through D anytime it says find the GCF. You're also going to factor out the GCF in the second set of parentheses. But when you're working with the second set of parentheses, sometimes you will have a leading sign that you want to make sure you bring down as part of the GCF. Also, there might be an occasion where you might not see a GCF. If you don't see a GCF, then you're just going to use 1 as the GCF so that we can get our leftovers. The reason why that's important is because in step 4, once you found the GCF in both set of parentheses, the leftovers must have matching parentheses. This way we can arrange our final answer that the matching binomial will be in one set of parentheses, and then the leftovers that we found in step 2 and step 3 will make up the other set of parentheses. This will be on Blackboard as a picture. But let's start by demonstrating these 4 steps with this problem here. Now, even though I said use the grouping method, no matter what type of factoring that we're doing, your first step, no matter if you're doing grouping, shortcut, FOIL, arch, whatever, is always to look to see if there's a GCF using all the terms that are up here. Since there's 4 terms, let's see if there's a GCF for all 4 terms. Remember, A through D. A, do we have matching set of parentheses? No. B, do we have the same letter in every single term? Close. Letter, letter, letter. Oh. So we don't have a common variable. Do we have a common number? Number, number, number. Notice this leading term has no coefficient. Remember, to do a common number factor, you're doing it based on coefficients and constants. If one of your terms doesn't have a coefficient, you don't have a common number factor. And D, does it start with a negative? No. So we do not have a GCF using all 4 terms. Some problems you will have a GCF, and then once you take out the GCF, you're going to have to see if we can break this down with the grouping method. Luckily, there's no GCF, so our next step would be to follow the grouping method. Step 1, we told you put parentheses around the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So let's do that here. So the first 2 terms, the w cubed and the 2w squared, will get a set of parentheses. And the second set of parentheses will group the last 2 terms. But notice there's a plus sign here. You want to make sure that you include it not in the first set of parentheses, but in the second set. See how my parentheses includes the plus sign in the second set? I didn't scoop it out and make sure that it was like between. I include it always in the second set of the parentheses. That's your first step. The second step says, now that I cut this problem into 2 mini problems, I'm going to factor out the GCF in the first set of parentheses. So in our first set of parentheses, remember, we saw that there was no GCF using all 4 terms, but here I'm going to see if there's a GCF only using the first 2 terms. Notice, there's no matching set of parentheses, but we do have the same letter. See, in these 2 terms, they both have a W. So we're going to pull out the GCF, W squared. Why squared? Because anytime we have the same letters, I always told you to grab the smallest exponent. 3 versus 2, I'm going to grab squared. Also, do we have a number in common? No, this has a coefficient, this doesn't. So we don't have a number, because remember, we're going through A through D. And does it start with a negative? No. So the only GCF was a W squared. Great. What are our leftovers? Well, remember, if I divide this by W squared and divide this by W squared, we're going to get our leftovers. Here, 3 W's versus 2 W's. You know you have more W's on top, just one. And here, remember, 2 versus 2, they're gone, but we're still left with this coefficient of +2. So we're done step 2. Step 3 says, hey, we're going to factor out the GCF in the second set of parentheses. Okay, let's look at the second set of parentheses. Here, again, remember your A through D. Do we have matching parentheses? No, no matching parentheses. Do we have the same letter in just this set of parentheses? We have a W here, but none here. So we don't have a common variable. Do we have a common number factor? Remember, to do common number factors, you do a tree diagram. Gotta remember, the 10 is actually 2 times 5. So they both have a 5. Does this start with a negative? No. But we at least know we have a GCF of the 5. Now what I'm going to tell you now is when you do the second set of parentheses, remember how we made it a big deal to include this inside the parentheses? You're going to get used to this by taking this leading sign and always dropping it down as part of your GCF. So if this starts as a plus, it's always going to be part of your GCF. If this starts as a negative, remember part D, bring this down as part. So you don't have to really worry about part D so much in this part, because whatever sign this is, automatically bring it down. It's part of your GCF. Now that you know your GCF is +5, let's get our leftovers. Factor out means we need to find our leftovers. When I divide each of these by a +5, 5 over 5 would be 1W, or you can just say W. +10 divided by +5, you're going to get a +2. We're done, step 3. So step 3 was to take out the GCF, which we did, bring down the leading sign here as +5. And notice, by doing that, step 4 says factor out the matching parentheses. By taking out the GCF here and taking out the GCF here, notice that we have matching binomials. So we're going to do the factoring out one last time. We did a GCF for the first half, GCF in the second half, and now we're doing a third GCF looking at both halves together, which is, we'll always have these matching set of parentheses. If these don't match, that means you didn't take out the correct GCF. You might have forgotten a sign or haven't gotten the right number, but when you're done, these supposed to match exactly, which they do. What we're going to do is take this as one set of parentheses, and then the GCFs that we got in step 2 and step 3 will become your other set of parentheses. So remember, you must have matching set of parentheses. You're going to take that matching set of parentheses, which is always a binomial, written as just one set of parentheses, and then our leftovers that we found, the GCFs from step 2 and 3. So for us, W plus 2, W plus 2, this is what I mean by the matching binomial. It just becomes one set of parentheses. And then the GCFs that we found in step 2 and step 3, this and this, they'll make up your other set of parentheses. W squared, and now you can see why I made a big deal to drop that sign, plus 5. This should be also a binomial as well, because if I distribute, I will get these 4 terms.